The train whistled through the open plains, its lonely cry echoing across the vast emptiness. Inside one of its rattling cars sat Evelyn Grace, a woman of quiet dignity and worn hands, staring out the window as the golden prairie rolled past. Her reflection in the glass looked older than she remembered, not from years alone, but from hope deferred. The other passengers chatted softly or dozed, but Evelyn sat still, clutching a small carpet bag and a letter creased from too much reading. That letter, simple, honest, and written in a careful hand, was the reason she had come all this way. It was from a man named Jack Callahan, a widowed rancher from Cedar Hollow who'd written seeking a woman of good heart and steady spirit. Evelyn, long convinced her chance at love had passed, had read and reread his words until she dared to believe she might yet be wanted. So she sold her few possessions, packed her Bible, and boarded the westbound train with trembling hope. But as the train slowed into the dusty station, her heart began to race. What if he'd changed his mind? What if he took one look at her and realized she wasn't what he wanted? Not young, not beautiful, not bright-eyed like the girls who turned heads in town. When the conductor called her stop, she stepped onto the platform, her shoes touching the red earth of a new beginning. The wind smelled of sage and dust. The town of Cedar Hollow spread before her, a few weathered buildings, a saloon, a church steeple, and wide silence beyond. She stood for a long moment, scanning the faces. People came and went, cowhands, merchants, mothers with children, but no one looked for her. The crowd thinned until she stood alone, clutching her suitcase and the letter in her pocket. The sun dipped low, painting everything in gold. But warmth did not reach her heart. The telegraph operator paused in his doorway, pity softening his eyes. "Ma'am," he said gently, "you waiting on someone?" Evelyn nodded, forcing a smile. "Yes, I believe I am." Minutes turned to hours. The last wagon rolled away. Even the stray dog that had wandered near trotted off toward the livery. Evelyn sank onto a wooden bench outside the depot, her throat tightened, her heart heavy with the sting of humiliation. She whispered to herself, "He must have forgotten. Or changed his mind." Her voice broke. "Maybe everyone does." As the sky deepened into twilight, she felt the full weight of her solitude, a loneliness deeper than the prairie itself. All her life, she'd given care and kindness to others, helping her sick mother, tending her neighbors' children, always putting her own dreams aside. Now, sitting alone in a strange town with no one waiting for her, she wondered if perhaps love had simply passed her by then. From the corner of her eye, she noticed a small figure, a little girl, no more than 6. Watching her from a few steps away, the child's dress was faded, her curls wild, and in her arms she cradled a threadbare rag doll. For a moment, neither spoke. Then the girl took a hesitant step forward. "Ma'am?" the little one asked, her voice trembling but clear. "Are you my new mama?" Evelyn blinked, startled. "Your mama?" The girl nodded earnestly. "Papa said a nice lady was coming on the train today. He said maybe she'd stay with us." Evelyn's breath caught before she could answer. The sound of hurried boots echoed down the platform. A tall man, rugged, sunburned, with kind eyes shadowed by exhaustion, approached quickly, tipping his hat. "Lila, there you are," he said, relief flooding his tone. Turning to Evelyn, he removed his hat and spoke gently. "Ma'am, I'm Jack Callahan. Forgive me. I thought you were arriving next week." Evelyn's heart pounded. So this was him, the man who'd written those words that carried her across miles of uncertainty. Jack looked between Evelyn and his little girl, then smiled, sheepishly, almost shyly. "Looks like Lila got to you first." Evelyn glanced down at the child, who still clutched her hand, eyes hopeful and full of trust. And in that moment, beneath the fading sunset, between heartbreak and new beginning, something shifted inside her. Maybe love hadn't passed her by after all. Maybe, just maybe, It had been waiting right here. In Cedar Hollow, in the small, brave voice of a child asking for a mother, the morning after Evelyn's arrival in Cedar Hollow. Dawned with a pale gold light spreading across the plains, the wind whispered through the tall grass, and a rooster crowed somewhere behind the barn. Evelyn woke to the scent of coffee and the soft murmur of voices, one deep and steady. The other small and sweet. She blinked away the sleep and remembered. She wasn't home in Kansas anymore. She was at Jack Callahan's ranch, a place that already felt like a crossroads between what she'd left behind and what she might yet become when she stepped outside the small guest room. She found little Lila sitting at the kitchen table, braiding her doll's yarn hair while Jack stirred something over the stove. It was a humble kitchen wood stove, chipped enamel dishes, and a single window framing the endless prairie, but it radiated a quiet warmth. "Good morning," Evelyn said softly. Unsure if she belonged in this scene, Jack turned, smiling faintly beneath his worn hat. "Mornin', Miss Grace. Hope you slept all right." "I did." "Thank you," she replied, "and please, call me Evelyn." Lila looked up eagerly. "Papa made pancakes." "He never makes pancakes unless it's Sunday," Jack chuckled, shaking his head. "Well, I thought we had reason enough to celebrate. It's not every day we get company this far out." Evelyn smiled, touched by his kindness, yet beneath his easy manner she sensed something, a quiet sorrow in his eyes, the kind born of loss and years of hard living. She had seen it before. In her own reflection as they sat to eat, Lila chattered freely, telling stories about her pony, the ranch cat, and how she and her father once rescued a calf during a storm. She was bright, lively, and completely unguarded, the kind of child who spoke straight from the heart. Evelyn listened, occasionally glancing at Jack, who seemed content just watching his daughter's joy after breakfast. Lila tugged Evelyn's sleeve. "Will you help me pick wildflowers, Miss Evelyn? There's a field full of them near the creek." Evelyn hesitated, looking to Jack for approval. He smiled. "Go on, she doesn't take to folks easy. But she seems mighty fond of you already." So they went, hand in hand, down a narrow path behind the barn. The prairie stretched wide and alive, dotted with daisies, bluebells, and the faint hum of bees. The sun was warm on their backs, and for the first time in a long while, Evelyn felt her heart begin to soften as they gathered flowers. Lila spoke suddenly, her tone quieter now. "Miss Evelyn, did you know my mama's in heaven?" Evelyn's hand froze mid-pick. She looked at the child, whose small face was solemn but not sad. "Your papa told me a little," she said gently. Lila nodded. "I miss her sometimes. Papa does too. He tries not to show it. But I know." Then she looked up, her eyes searching Evelyn's. "But Papa smiles more since you came." Evelyn's throat tightened. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered, brushing a curl from the girl's cheek. "You're very brave." Lila shrugged in that innocent way children do when they've already learned too much of life. "I just wish Papa wasn't lonely anymore." Evelyn couldn't answer. The weight of those words lingered in the still air. She knew too well what loneliness felt like, how it crept into your bones and made even sunlight feel cold when they returned to the house. Lila ran ahead, showing her father the bouquet they'd gathered. Jack caught Evelyn's eye over his daughter's head. Gratitude unspoken but clear. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" she asked, her voice quiet. "For giving her a reason to smile like that again." Evelyn looked at the little girl spinning in circles. Flowers clutched to her chest. A faint warmth spread through her heart. Fragile but real, for years she had believed her life's chances were over, her story already written, but here, in the laughter of a child and the quiet admiration of a widowed man, she sensed something stirring, a second chance she never dared to hope for that evening. As the sky turned crimson and gold, Evelyn stood on the porch, watching Lila chase fireflies across the yard. The wind carried the smell of hay and wood smoke. The sounds of horses settling in their stalls. Jack joined her. Leaning against the railing, "She likes you," he said after a long silence. "More than I've seen her take to anyone since her mama passed." Evelyn's voice was soft. "She's a remarkable girl," he nodded. "She gets that from her mother." They stood together in the fading light, neither speaking further, but the quiet between them wasn't empty. It was the kind of quiet that hinted at something growing, something both of them were too careful or too afraid to name. And inside the house, the wildflowers they'd picked rested in a chipped vase on the table, small, simple, and beautiful, a promise of life returning where sorrow had once been. The days that followed settled into a rhythm that felt almost like a dream. Quiet mornings, golden afternoons, and soft laughter echoing through the ranch house. Evelyn, once unsure where she belonged, found herself gradually woven into the daily life of the Callahan homestead. At first, she tried to stay out of the way, polite, careful, offering help but never assuming her place. Yet every sunrise brought small invitations that pulled her closer. Lila would wake her early, dragging her to the kitchen with messy hair and sleepy giggles. "Come on, Miss Evelyn, Papa says breakfast tastes better when we all help." So she rolled up her sleeves and learned to make flapjacks over the wood stove, to gather eggs from the hens, to sweep the porch while Lila danced barefoot through the dust. Jack would pass through quietly, offering a shy nod or a word of thanks, his presence steady as the land itself. The ranch was a world unto its own, wild and wide, full of work that never ended. There were fences to mend, horses to feed, and storms to watch for on the horizon. Evelyn had grown up in town, sewing dresses and keeping tidy homes for others, but here, surrounded by the call of meadowlarks and the scent of cut hay, she discovered a different kind of life, one built on strength and stillness. She worked hard, sometimes until her back ached and her hands blistered. But it wasn't the pain she felt, it was purpose. For the first time in years, she wasn't invisible. She mattered. One afternoon, as she hung laundry behind the house, the wind tugging at the sheets like sails, Lila came running up, breathless with excitement. "Miss Evelyn, look." She held up a small clay figure, lopsided but charming, of a woman in a long dress. "It's you," Lila said proudly. "I made it with Papa's help." Evelyn knelt, touched beyond words. "You made this for me?" Lila nodded. "You make our house happy. Papa laughs more when you're here." The words struck deep. Stirring something tender inside her, she hugged the girl tightly, breathing in the scent of sunshine and wildflowers in her hair. "You've made my heart happy too, sweetheart." Later that evening, as the sun melted into the horizon, Jack joined Evelyn by the corral. He leaned on the fence, his gaze following his daughter chasing fireflies near the barn. "She hasn't laughed like that in a long time," he said quietly. "Not since her mama passed." Evelyn hesitated, unsure how to respond. "She's a special child," she said softly, "full of light." He nodded. "Takes after her mother that way. I didn't think she'd take to anyone again. Didn't think I would either." The air between them grew still. Jack's words lingered, unspoken feelings hidden beneath them. Evelyn looked at him, the man who had once been just a name on a letter, and saw something she hadn't expected. Gentleness beneath the grit, loneliness beneath the strength. For a fleeting moment, she imagined what it might be like to belong here, to wake to the sound of Lila's laughter, to share quiet mornings with Jack, to build something lasting out of two broken lives. The thought frightened her, yet warmed her all the same. But not everyone in Cedar Hollow saw her with such kindness when she went into town for supplies. The whispers followed her. "That's the mail-order bride he sent for? Poor thing. Doesn't look like much. He's only keeping her for the girl's sake." Evelyn kept her head high, pretending not to hear, but inside, the doubts clawed at her. Do I truly belong here? Or am I just a guest in someone else's story? That evening, she sat on the porch, Staring into the fading light, Layla brought her a flower crown sheet. Made clumsy but full of love, and placed it gently on her head. "Now you look like you belong here," she said with a grin. Evelyn smiled through the chew. Sting of tears. Maybe belonging wasn't something given. Maybe it was. Something grown, little by little, through kindness, laughter, and shared days beneath the same sky. And as the stars began to rise, Evelyn realized she wasn't standing on the edge of someone else's life anymore. She was becoming part of it. The peace that had begun to take root on the Callahan ranch was fragile, like wildflowers blooming after a long frost. Beautiful but easily bruised. For weeks, Evelyn had found a quiet rhythm there. Lila's laughter filled the air. The house felt alive again, and even Jack seemed lighter, his eyes softening whenever he looked her way. But peace never lasts long on the prairie, not when old wounds still breathe. Beneath the surface it started. With a visit to town, Evelyn had gone with Lila to buy flour and fabric from the general store. The day was bright, but the moment she stepped inside, she felt the shift, eyes glancing her way, whispers blooming like weeds. "That's her," someone murmured. The mail order woman. Heard she showed up a week late. Poor Jack. Callahan must have been desperate. Doesn't look like she belongs on a ranch. Does she? Evelyn kept her back straight and her chin high, pretending not to hear. But the words cut deep. She'd heard gossip before, about women who tried to start over, about those who didn't fit the mold. But this time, the sting was sharper because part of her believed it as she and Lila left the store. A woman called out softly, "Best be careful. Miss Gray, Cedar Hollow don't take kindly to strangers thinking they can take what ain't theirs." Evelyn froze, her heart twisting. She didn't reply. She simply took Lila's hand and walked faster, the child looking up in confusion. "Miss Evelyn? Why are they mean?" She forced a smile. "They just don't know us yet, sweetheart." But that night, when the house was quiet, Evelyn sat alone on the porch, staring at the stars. The doubts whispered louder than the wind. Maybe they're right. Maybe I don't belong here. Maybe I never will. A few days later, the tension surfaced again, this time closer to home. Jack returned from town late, his jaw tight and his hat pulled low. He avoided her eyes during supper. Lila sensed the mood and went to bed early, leaving Evelyn to clear the table in silence. Finally, she asked softly, "Jack, what's wrong?" He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Folks been talking, saying I brought shame on my wife's memory by bringing another woman here so soon." The words struck Evelyn like a slap. She set the dish down carefully, afraid her shaking hands would betray her. "I see. I don't listen to gossip," he said quickly. "But this town remembers my Martha. They don't understand." Evelyn swallowed hard, her chest tight. "I never wanted to replace her, Jack." He looked up then, pain flickering in his eyes. "I know that, but some wounds don't heal easy out here." The silence between them thickened, heavy with things neither could say. Evelyn turned away, blinking back tears. She understood grief. She had lived beside it her whole life, but she hadn't expected to feel like a shadow haunting another woman's home that night. She lay awake, listening to the creak of the old house and the wind whispering through the cracks. Lila stirred in her small bed across the room, murmuring in her sleep, "Mama." Evelyn's breath caught. The word felt like both balm and blade. The next morning, Evelyn saddled one of the gentler horses and rode out early, needing space to think. The prairie stretched endlessly before her. Open and quiet, she stopped by the creek where wildflowers grew and let the rains fall. Slack tears came freely then, for the whispers, for the ache of never being enough, for daring to dream of belonging when she'd always been the outsider. But as she wept, she heard laughter, light, sweet, unmistakable. Lila had followed her, barefoot and fearless, clutching a basket of muffins she'd packed herself. "Papa said you might be sad," the girl said, "so I brought breakfast." Evelyn knelt, gathering the little one into her arms. "You shouldn't have come alone," she said. But her voice trembled with love. Not scolding, Lila smiled up at her. "Bright as dawn. You can't be sad. Miss Evelyn, Papa says storms don't last forever." Evelyn laughed softly through her tears. "Your papa's right," in that moment, holding Lila close. She realized something profound. Belonging wasn't granted by a town's approval or erased by gossip. It was earned through love, through care, through showing up day after day. Even when the world whispered against you as she rode back toward the ranch, the sun breaking through gray clouds, Evelyn felt a fragile strength returning. The wounds were still there, but so was the will to heal, and for the first time, she began to believe that maybe this place, this family, could still become her home. The storm that rolled over Cedar Hollow that night wasn't just in the sky. It was inside Evelyn's heart too. For weeks, she had tried to quiet the doubts planted by gossip and grief. She worked hard, smiled through the pain, and told herself that peace would return, but peace doesn't come when you keep pretending you don't. Hurt rain drummed against the roof of the Callahan Ranch as thunder rumbled in the distance. Lila slept soundly in her room, clutching her doll. Unaware of the storm outside, Evelyn sat by the window, watching lightning flash across the dark horizon. Each burst illuminated the field she had learned to love, the land that no longer felt strange but somehow sacred. Jack found her there. Sitting in the half-light, he looked tired, his shirt damp from fixing the barn doors before the rain hit. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked softly. She shook her head. "It's not the storm keeping me awake." Jack leaned against the wall, silent for a long time. Then he said, "I heard more talk in town today." Evelyn's stomach sank. "More?" He nodded slowly. "Some folks say you'll leave when the work gets too hard. Others say I only took you in out of pity." Evelyn's hands clenched in her lap. "And what do you say, Jack?" He hesitated. "Too long. I don't know what to say anymore." The words stung worse than she expected. She rose to her feet, voice trembling. "After all this time, you still don't know me?" Jack's jaw tightened. "It's not that simple. Evelyn, this town's got long memories, my Martha." Her heart cracked at the sound of that name. "I'm not trying to replace her, Jack. I never was." "I know," he said quietly. "But that doesn't make it easier." Evelyn turned away, tears threatening to spill. The storm outside howled, shaking the windows. "I thought I'd finally found a place I could belong," she whispered. "But maybe I was wrong." Jack reached out as if to stop her, but she was already walking toward the door. "Evelyn, please." She paused at the threshold, rain lashing against her shawl. "No. Jack, I need to think, to remember who I am when the world isn't telling me. I don't belong." And before he could say another word, she stepped out into the storm. The rain soaked her through within minutes. But she didn't care. She walked until the ranch lights were a memory behind her. The fields glistened under the flashes of lightning, and the wind carried the scent of earth and renewal. She found shelter beneath a lone cottonwood tree by the creek, the same place where she and Lila had picked flowers weeks before there. In the quiet chaos of the storm, Evelyn let herself feel everything: the pain, the longing, the loneliness. For years, she had lived for others, for her mother, for her employers, for the image of the woman she was supposed to be. She had crossed half a country searching for belonging, only to realize that it could never come from a man, a home, or a town's approval. It had to come from within. As the rain softened to a mist, she lifted her face to the sky and whispered, "I belong because I love, not because they let me." In that moment, something changed. The fear that had haunted her of being unwanted, unworthy, forgotten, began to fade. She thought of Lila's laughter, of the way the child's hand fit perfectly in hers. And she knew she had made a difference, that love was real, that it mattered. By dawn, the storm had passed. The world glittered under a pale morning light. Jack rode out searching for her, his face drawn with worry when he spotted her near the creek, sitting beneath the cottonwood. Relief flooded his eyes. He dismounted and approached quietly. "You shouldn't have come out here alone," he said. Voice rough Evelyn met his gaze, calm now and needed to understand something. Jack frowned. "And what's that?" She rose, brushing the mud from her dress. "That I don't need permission to belong here." "Jack, I already do, because I've given my heart to this place. To Lila, and to you, whether you realize it or not." He stared at her, the truth of her words breaking through the wall of guilt he'd built then. Finally, he stepped closer, rain-damp hair falling across his forehead. "I do realize it," he said quietly. "I was just too afraid to lose it." Evelyn smiled faintly, eyes glistening, then stopped being afraid for a long moment. They stood in silence as the wind rustled the wet grass around them. The storm had taken the night, but it had left something behind: clarity, courage, and the fragile beginnings of love that was finally real. The morning dawned soft and golden over the Callahan ranch. The prairie stretching wide under a clear sky, birds flitted across the fields, and the gentle scent of wildflowers mingled with the earthy aroma of freshly tilled soil. Evelyn Gray stood on the porch, watching Lila chase butterflies, her small laughter drifting on the warm breeze. For the first time in months, perhaps her entire life, Evelyn felt a sense of peace, of belonging, of home. The storm of doubts and whispers that had haunted her seemed to have passed. She had faced the town's judgment, the echoes of her own insecurities, and even the fear of rejection from Jack himself, and through it all, she had discovered a truth she had never allowed herself to believe. Love doesn't arrive on a timetable, and family isn't always born. Sometimes it is chosen. Built with trust, care, and courage. Jack Callahan approached, boots softly crunching on the gravel, his rugged frame silhouetted against the morning light. Lila ran to him, giggling, holding out a bouquet of wildflowers she had gathered herself. "Papa, look what I picked for Miss Evelyn." Evelyn knelt to receive the blossoms, her heart swelling at the simple act of affection. The girl's eyes shone with a pure, unguarded joy, a joy Evelyn hadn't realized she had been missing in her own life. She smiled down at Lila and kissed her forehead gently. "Thank you, sweetheart. These are perfect." Jack leaned on the porch railing, his gaze lingering on Evelyn with an intensity she had begun to recognize as something more than gratitude or respect. "You've changed this place," he said quietly, almost to himself. "Changed us." Evelyn glanced at him, her pulse quickening. The fear that had plagued her for so long, the fear of never being wanted, never being enough, melted beneath the warmth of his words. She realized that love had not passed her by. It had been waiting here, in small acts of trust and laughter, in moments of courage and care. It had been waiting for her to see it and accept it. The day unfolded like a story written by the sun itself. They prepared a small celebration in the yard, neighbors invited, the ranch alive with laughter and chatter. A modest wooden arch was decorated with wildflowers, and the scent of fresh bread and pies mingled with the prairie air. Lila, radiant in a simple white dress, clutched Evelyn's hand as the two of them approached Jack. Evelyn's heart pounded as Jack took her hand in his, the roughness of his palms grounding her in the present. The ceremony was simple, heartfelt, witnessed by the people who had watched the story of this little family unfold. There were no grand declarations, only quiet words spoken under the open sky, promises made to care, to protect, and to love, not out of obligation, but because their hearts had chosen one another afterward. As the sun dipped low, casting golden hues over the rolling fields, the small family sat on the porch, watching the world in comfortable silence. Lila leaned against Evelyn, her eyes heavy with contentment, and Jack rested a hand on both their shoulders. Steady and warm, the prairie seemed to exhale, the wind carrying with it a sense of renewal and hope. Evelyn realized that this was what she had been searching for all her life, not a perfect love story, not a flawless home, but a place where hearts were mended, laughter returned, and a little girl could whisper, "Will you be my mama?" and mean it, a place where she was not just accepted, but needed. As the stars began to prick the deepening sky, Evelyn closed her eyes, listening to the rhythm of life around her, the soft neighing of horses, the murmur of wind through the grass, the quiet breaths of those she loved here. In the heart of Cedar Hollow, she had found more than family. She had found herself, and in that realization, she knew one thing for certain: this was only the beginning. Love, belonging, and home were no longer distant dreams. They were here, tangible and real, wrapped in the arms of a little girl and the quiet devotion of a man who had learned to open his heart again. Evelyn smiled. Her heart full, the world could whisper, the past could haunt, but nothing could take away this truth. She was home. She was loved, and her new beginning had only just begun.